Hey, good morning everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee Chat with Matt. I'm your host, Matt Zerby, and I am here in my backyard. And I thought we'd do something a little bit different today. A lot of times I get asked questions. You know, we post these videos to our Facebook page and to our YouTube page, and we get comments on our YouTube channel. We get comments after the fact on our Facebook page. I also get customers that walk into the store or send us emails. And I usually try to keep track of, you know, some of the more popular questions or things that are happening. And I use a lot of those as topics for some of these videos. But not all of them maybe make for a full-length episode or whatever you want to call it. So what I've done is I've compiled a list of questions that folks have asked in, various formats. Again, either on our YouTube channel or via email or in person, something like that. So I've got a nice list of questions here that people have asked that I thought I would run through and kind of give you some answers to some of the more common questions, with the hopes that, maybe more than one of you out there have a similar question or would like to know the answer to that. So there is no particular order or theme to these questions. In fact, they really kind of run the gamut on things. So we'll just kind of run through them, and hopefully you'll pick something up. And we'll just kind of go from there. So the first question is, what shrub is recommended for a sunny corner of the yard? Now this is actually a fairly good question, because I do have a lot of folks who frequently ask me about these hot, dry, sunny locations, something out away from the house where the sun is just beating on that, corner of the yard or that location from, morning till night. It doesn't have the shade of a tree or the house or some other means of protection, so it's just baking out there. And there's actually a handful of things that are going to do really, really well in a scenario like that. A couple weeks ago we talked hydrangeas. There is a group of hydrangeas called the panicled hydrangeas. Those are going to be your large cone-shaped flowers, things like limelight, quickfire, vanilla strawberry. On the smaller side, little lime, little quickfire, some of those types of things. So those are going to hold up really, really well. They don't flop, they don't burn up, they're very drought tolerant once established, so that's a really good choice. The flowering weigela plants are going to work really well. In fact, they love that hot, dry location. So weigela, if you're unfamiliar with those, have little trumpet-shaped flowers. They're typically pink or red, although there's some whites and some other colors, but they bloom very, very heavily. They are a favorite of the hummingbirds. Some of the newer varieties, like the Sonic Bloom series, are repeat bloomers, so they bloom real heavily in May and then will bloom sporadically all throughout the rest of the year. A lot of the reblooming varieties will give you color from, mid to late spring all the way through into fall. So great coloring plants. It's another group where they've done a lot of breeding on them. So we've got some small varieties like My Monet or Spilled Wine. We have moderate or medium-sized varieties like Very Fine Wine, Wine and Roses, more colorful, some of those. And we've got some of the larger varieties like the Sonic Bloom, Red Prince, things like that. So there's generally a weigela for just about every size that you might be looking for. Some other ones that I won't necessarily just go into great detail on. Many of the viburnum will hold up great to full sun. All of the lilac really enjoy full sun, from your dwarf varieties like Dwarf Korean, Bloomerang, and Miss Kim, up to your larger varieties like Common Purple, any of the French or Vulgaris type lilacs. Any of those are going to hold up really, really well to full sun. So just a few of my favorites. If that location has a little extra moisture to it, you could even try some of the red dogwood, red twig dogwood, or red osier dogwood are going to work really well. So great question. Next on the list, is now a good time of year to plant? We're here in August right now, and this time of year I actually think is one of the best times of year for planting. We definitely are kind of normally a little more dry at this time of year, so I always kind of put a little caveat on that. It's a great time of year as long as you're not planning a 2-week, extended vacation or something like that. Otherwise, I really like planting at this time of year because the ground is warm. That encourages root growth. The days are getting shorter, so the plants are starting to stop or slow down their top growth. that vegetative growth, which are, new leaves, new stems, things like that. They're starting to put more of an emphasis on root development at this time of year, and they're diminishing those other things like the vegetative growth. Also at this time of year, our ground here tends to be a little more on the dry side. That may seem counterintuitive, but oftentimes when we're planting in the spring, this year is certainly a perfect example of this, the ground is just saturated and has, we were getting rain, 1.5 inches, 2 inches every week, and the ground just never got a chance to dry out. And on well-established plants, it was wonderful for those. But for brand new things that were planted in the ground and maybe have all of the roots contained in, that root zone from the pot, when that is just sitting in water and never has a chance to dry out and isn't used to that because it's been growing in a pot where it's very well drained. A potted plant, you water it really good, all the water drains out the bottom, and some of it, of course, stays in the soil, but it then gets used up and dries out fairly fast. But in the ground, that wasn't happening, and we were seeing some root rot issues or just slow to establish type scenarios. So at this time of year, you kind of avoid some of those pitfalls. So as long as you're able to water, this is a wonderful time of year to plant. And of course, cooler days, shorter days, and longer nights really help that root development process. So I would say it's a very good time of year to plant. There are some things that I would say get in the ground sooner rather than later. Things like Japanese maples or any plant that in your area may be a little touchy or a little, you might be pushing it in terms of its winter hardiness. You're definitely going to want to get those in now rather than say, later on in October, which I still find to be a wonderful time of year to plant, especially most trees and shrubs. How should I protect my trees, specifically arborvitae, for winter? My guess, I don't have a lot of information there on that question, but my guess is that the customer was asking about animal damage, but they could also be asking about winter damage, so I'll cover both. Generally speaking, most arborvitae don't really need protection from the winter winds, things like that. If you've got some very young ones, little 1-2 year old little seedling grown or something like that, those you may want to protect with a little bit of a burlap fence to protect it specifically for winter winds, which generally come out of the north or west. So protecting them from the northwest locations generally will help. You can also use products like anti-desiccants, although I don't love them for arborvitae, but they do work really well for most other evergreens. So an anti-desiccant is a spray, for lack of a better term. It's like a varnish. You spray it on, it sort of coats the leaf. It helps seal the moisture into the leaf for the winter time. Works really well for rhododendron, boxwood, any touchy pines, spruce, things like that. So that would work really well. Other than that, I don't recommend doing anything to arborvitae for winter in particular, other than making sure they go into winter with adequate moisture. If we have a dry fall, it's really a great idea to give them consistent watering through the fall months so that they go into winter well hydrated. On the animal front, arborvitae are subject to deer damage in particular, but also rabbit damage. So rabbit damage, you're going to be dealing with the lower portion of the plant up to about the lower, say, 2.5 or so feet. Sometimes they will get up on the snow and be able to reach even higher. So chicken wire or wire mesh fencing around the base is a great idea if you've got rabbit issues. Otherwise, for both deer and rabbit, there's a wonderful rabbit and deer repellent called Plant Skid. We have found that to be very, very successful. So Plant Skid is PLANTSKYDD. It's a great product. We carry it in the store and have it pretty regularly. We carry it in a liquid form, which can be sprayed directly on the plants. We carry it in a granular form that can be sprinkled around the base. For winter damage, specifically on things like arborvitae, burning bush, chokeberry, other fruit trees, things like that they might be, rabbits might be munching on, I recommend the liquid be applied directly to the plant itself. If it's something that they're chewing the bark on, then you're going to spray it directly to the bark. If it's something like arborvitae where they're chewing the leaves, you're going to spray it directly on the foliage. I normally like to spray that as late in the year as possible before it gets too cold to apply liquid sprays. So that's going to be something like, mid to late November is generally a good time frame for something like that. This past year would have been early December application, and then if you need to, you can repeat apply in the middle of winter if you get a warm enough day where you can get out there and spray the plant. Every once in a while during February or March, we have a warm enough day, you know, it's 40 and sunny or something like that, and you could go ahead and apply something like Plant Skid. The leaves, next question, the leaves are starting to turn red on my maple tree. It seems early. Should I be concerned? That's another one where I'd love to get some more information, how old the tree is, when it was planted. Is it just one branch that's turning red, or is it the entire tree? But I'll kind of answer in generalizations. Red maple oftentimes will start to show a little bit of stress at this time of year, so it's not uncommon for autumn blaze, red point, red sunset, things like that, to start to get a little bit of red here and there throughout the tree, or more specifically up at the top of the tree, especially at this time of year when it's starting to get a little more dry. As I mentioned, we had a very nice wet spring and early summer. Now that we're getting into the kind of late summer, almost fall time, we're definitely starting to see the ground dry out a little bit more. Those ups and downs in temperature and ups and downs in soil moisture definitely cause some stress, and that's one of the plant's signs of stress would be that, you know, that red fall coloring, starting to see a little bit of that. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the days are getting shorter. That also prompts fall color to start in certain plants. And then lastly, this year in particular, probably because of all the moisture we had this year, but we're seeing a lot of insect issues, specifically something called oyster shell scale. If you are seeing specific sections of the plant, you know, maybe just one branch or a side of the tree or something like that turning red where the rest of the tree appears green and healthy, you may want to check that plant for something called oyster shell scale. It's a very small insect that looks like an oyster shell, so that's why it gets its name, and you'll see these little gray or brown bumps on the bark. That's oyster shell scale. You will want to treat for that because they are sucking the life out of the plant. I noticed some yucky stuff on the mulch in my landscape bed today. It looks like vomit. How do I get rid of it? Well, that is a substance called slime mold. It also goes by the name of dog vomit mold, so that obviously checks out in terms of this viewer's question. So it generally looks like a yellow or a kind of brownish yellow fuzzy goop in the mulch. It is the good news is it is perfectly harmless. It doesn't harm the plants. It doesn't harm people or pets or anything like that. So generally speaking, you can just avoid it or just let it go. We do tend to see it more at this time of year when we're having a lot of humidity. So heat and humidity are one of the things that kind of help that mold grow. You can do one of a couple things if it's really bothersome or very, you know, it's in a high traffic area or it's really unattractive or something like that. Take a stiff garden rake and rake up the surface of the mulch, loosen the mulch, get some oxygen in there, break that up. That generally helps quite a bit. Otherwise, you can put a small amount of bleach, like 1 part bleach to 5 parts water, and do a little spritz on there. That also generally tends to kind of kill that without having any adverse effects to the plants or ground or anything like that. But again, it is basically harmless, so you can just let it go. Okay, next question. Can you help my blue spruce from dying? Another one where I'd love some more information, but I could definitely guess here. We're in northern Illinois, and more specifically throughout the upper Midwest. For the last almost 20 years, we have been seeing a massive decline in the health of Colorado blue spruce. So technically speaking, there's no such thing as a blue spruce. Those are called, their real name is Colorado spruce, but we generally hear them called blue spruce. But there are Colorado green spruce and Colorado blue, and all of them are susceptible to the this particular disease that is causing this mass kind of decline in the spruce population, and it is called Rhizosphaera needlecast. It is a fungal disease. It tends to spread when we have a lot of moisture on the needles, so specifically wet early springtime is what's going to allow that disease to spread. So what can you do about it? If you are trying to protect your trees or prevent the spread from getting any worse, you will want to use a fungicide. We recommend a product called Infuse, or anything with propiconazole or chlorothalonil, anything like that. Those are going to be good products to use. They are listed for needle cast. You are going to want to check your state to make sure it's something that can be applied in your state. And you're going to want to make sure that you don't have any streams or waterways, things like that, in and around those spruce trees, because these particular fungicides can be harmful to water invertebrates. But otherwise, the spray would be in the late spring, early summer, when they're starting to push their new growth. You're going to spray 3 or 4 applications about 10 to 12 days apart. Generally works quite well. Spraying early in the year, spraying late in the year is going to be useless. It's just a waste of your time and money, so don't do that. But the sprays are pretty effective and do a real good job of keeping the disease at bay. The downside to this disease is it is something that's going to come back every year. As I mentioned, more wet years, it's going to be worse than if it was a really dry year. I do avoid or recommend avoid planting Colorado spruce whenever possible. We haven't been selling the Colorado spruce for many years now, and I recommend things like green giant arborvitae, Norway spruce, white pine as suitable replacements. If you really want that blue color, there's a spruce called Myers spruce, which we have found to be quite resistant to the disease and still has a pretty good blue color to it. Next question, I watched your video on why we shouldn't be planting ornamental pear trees. I have one that was planted in the yard already when we moved in. I'd like to remove it. What should I replace it with? That's a great question. Yes, I have an entire video on ornamental pear trees and why we shouldn't be planting them in, well, really in all of the Midwest, but real specifically in northern Illinois, we're seeing them escape cultivation. They are taking over natural areas, prairies, woods, wetlands. They are a nightmare for land managers, whether it's private land or public land managers. They are a nightmare. So if you're unfamiliar with it, check out that video. These are going to be things like the Calorie pears, the Bradford pears, Chanticleer, all of those types of pears. Many of them were thought to be sterile. I still don't recommend them. The ones that were thought to be sterile are still providing pollen or are cross-pollinating with other plants, so just definitely not a good idea to plant them. So if you're going to remove it, what should you replace it with? I'll give you a few of my top choices. There's a great serviceberry tree called Spring Flurry. Has white flowers and gorgeous fall color, similar in appearance to a pear, so that'd be a great choice. If you want that nice slender shape and a similar size, there's a tree called American Century Linden. I really like that a lot. Some of the, if you can afford to have something a little bit bigger, the tulip trees are beautiful trees. We've got some nice upright magnolias like Galaxy that would be a good choice. And then lastly, there are a group of oak trees that are, columnar in habit. So we just call them the group columnar oaks. Some of my favorites are Crimson Spire, Street Spire, Kindred Spirit, and Regal Prince. Those are all going to be very upright, narrow oaks, around 8 to 12 or 15 feet wide, 30 to 40 tall, so just about the same shape and size as most of those pear trees, and certainly would be a really good, suitable replacement. One last thing, there are a few upright crabapples that I really like. These are newer varieties like Rejoice, Adirondack, Ivory Spear, and Raspberry Spear. Those are going to be some really good choices. My yard looks awful. It used to be nice, but now there's random brown patches here and there. Again, keep in mind, it's mid-August. It's hot and humid at this time of year. We've had a lot of rain early, and now we're into a, we got a little bit of rain just a couple days ago. I think 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, which was great, but we could use a little more. but we're definitely getting to that time of year when the lawn is starting to get stressed out from drought stress. And when you combine that with the dewy mornings and humidity and all that kind of stuff, longer nights, those are kind of the perfect breeding grounds for a lot of fungal diseases, things like dollar spot. There's a whole bunch of fungal diseases that can affect your lawn at this time of year. So those same fungicides that I was mentioning earlier, Infuse, propiconazole, and chlorothalonil are going to be great broad spectrum fungicides that are safe and effective to use on the lawn. That would be my best guess as to what you're seeing. I would also suggest that you consider overseeding. Oftentimes we get into a situation where a lawn is 20, 30 years old, it's starting to get tired. Some of the lawn varietals, the lawn grass varietals that were planted 20 or 30 years ago are not nearly as naturally disease tolerant or disease resistant as some of the newer varieties. So you may consider doing some overseeding this late summer. End of August and all of September and early October are great for putting down lawn seed. So that could be an overseeding project or a new seed project. Lastly, you may consider doing a little bit of fertilization. There's some spring or fall, summer and fall lawn booster type products. Those are going to really help increase the health of the lawn, which thereby increases the disease tolerance and disease resistance that the lawn has naturally. This is a great question. I have a wet spot in the back corner of my yard. When it rains a lot, I can't even mow that area for a week or two until it dries out. I'm thinking of just planting some trees or shrubs. What do you recommend? This is a situation or a scenario that I have a lot of folks who ask me about. They've got that low corner of the backyard. Maybe there's a drain back there, or maybe the neighbor has blocked the natural flow of water, so when it rains it kind of pools in your corner of the yard, that type of thing. Or maybe you just have a naturally low spot. There's a handful of trees that'll do really well in there. Any of the bald cypresses will do really well. Dwarf bald cypress like Peeve Minaret, really narrow bald cypress like Shawnee Brave or regular bald cypress would work great. There are a handful of willow shrubs. Arctic blue willow or dwarf Arctic willow it's called would work very well. The dappled willow or flamingo willow would work very well. Red osier or red twig dogwood or any of the various cultivars of red twig dogwood would work quite well. Button bush is a wonderful native shrub that loves extra moisture. That's going to work out really well for you. There's a native shrub called bladder nut that would do really well in there too. Elderberry do pretty well in fairly wet locations. So those are some of the better choices for low wet areas. You could also consider the dawn redwood and the swamp white oak. Those are going to hold up really well, as will the plane tree. So kind of like the American sycamore. Those are going to hold up really well in those low wet locations. You're going to want to avoid evergreens. Most of the time evergreens really don't love excessive moisture or really low wet locations, although the native white cedar can hold up fairly well, but not the best at it. All right, handful more here. My neighbors put in an above ground pool and have a lot of wild parties. That's unfortunate. I need some privacy, but my 5-foot fence isn't cutting it. Bunch of options. Again, I'd love to see the location, maybe some photos or measurements of the area. But assuming you've got some room, top on my list is going to be the green giant arborvitae. It is uber fast growing. I've got a handful of them here at home. They honestly average 2 to 3 feet a year. So they are very robust, rapid growers. They hold their leaves all winter long. They are green. They stay nice and dense. They have very few disease or insect problems to speak of. And they hold up really well to full sun to mostly shade. So pretty tolerant of just about any planting location. They will get 20 to 30 feet tall and 8 to 12-ish feet wide, although maybe wider, but they do shear really well. So you can trim them with, hedge clippers or anything like that if you need to. But that would be my first choice. Techni arborvitae would certainly work well. The Norway spruce would work really well. Those are all going to be evergreen options. If it's just obviously a summertime thing that you want to block during the summer months when they're using the pool and you're sitting on your deck or patio, there's a whole bunch of other options. You could get into some of the taller viburnum like Chicago luster, which is an arrowwood viburnum, or black haw viburnum would work really well. Some of your bigger lilacs would work just fine. Even some of your deciduous trees, things like the American hornbeam, firespire American hornbeam, European hornbeam with its nice upright narrow profile, they can be planted very close together. Those columnar oak trees that I was mentioning would work really well and would do a great job of blocking. So there's a lot of choices. It would just really depend upon the planting location and the budget and the scenario that you're trying to take care of. Okay, here's a question. This is probably the question that I have gotten asked, or something similar to this, most this year. This viewer writes, our pink crabapple tree bloomed beautifully earlier this year. Now it looks almost dead. Lots of leaves have already fallen, and the ones that are still on the tree are yellow and have black spots. It's about 20 years old. Should I just cut it down? No, don't just cut it down. I can all but guarantee that your tree has a fungal disease called apple scab. I've been in this line of work now for 32 years. I would say this is for sure a top 5 worst years for apple scab, and maybe right up there at the very top. All of those crazy early swings in weather, all of that early rain we had, were just perfect breeding grounds for this disease to spread. It is a fungal disease. The good news is that it resets every year. So there is no internal damage done to the tree. It's all external on the foliage. It can be sprayed as a preventative next spring, but there is nothing that you can do or spray at this time of year that's going to be of any help. So we do have a web page that is on our website, obviously, that is devoted to apple scab. It's got a great kind of spray schedule on there. I also have posted a video to our YouTube channel. It is also on our website that describes apple scab disease and control methods in the video as well. So you may want to check that out. But no, it's not a lost cause. Don't cut it down. That being said, some of the newer varieties of crabapple are highly resistant to it. So those, if you wanted to replace the tree, you could look at some of those. Otherwise, it is very specific to apples or crabapples. So if you were to put in a magnolia or a lilac tree or a redbud, there's zero chance that they are going to get apple scab because they are completely resistant to it. It is a very host-specific disease. All right, next question. We are building a new house. It will not be done until mid to late November. We have 2 young kids and 2 dogs. I'm concerned about not having a lawn until next year and having a muddy yard all winter. How late can we plant grass? Okay, so mid to late November is definitely too late for seeding grass or seeding a lawn in our area here in northern Illinois. You'd have to go pretty far south in order to be able to seed at that time of year. That being said, I recall working on a project in the Elgin, Illinois area, and we were working on that project throughout the month of November, and the week of Thanksgiving we were installing their lawn. It was a fully sodded lawn, and we started grading for the lawn, doing the final grade on the Monday or Tuesday of Thanksgiving. Tuesday, Wednesday, we were putting down the sod, and it started snowing when the sod arrived, and we were literally shoveling the snow off of the freshly tilled and freshly raked out areas for us to put the sod down. And the snow continued to come down. When it was all said and done, we had about 10 inches of snow on the ground. That was probably the best lawn we've ever installed. So it holds up very, very well to being put down. Sod does anyway. Holds up very well to being put down late in the year. That snow then melted the following week and helped just kind of water that lawn in and push that sod down a bit and just kind of matted it down. Absolutely perfect conditions, and that lawn was absolutely gorgeous the next year. and has been ever since. So you definitely can get away with sod at that time of year, but I would not recommend seed at all. There's zero chance that that lawn will take, and that'll just be a waste of your money if you're putting seed down that late in the year. All right, a couple more questions here. I'm searching for good plants for fall color. Everything in my yard is just green and boring. What are some nice smaller plants for fall color? So there's a handful of shrubs that are going to give you great fall color. There's also a handful of perennials that will give you nice fall color, and I will give you a handful of those options in no particular order. I love Fothergilla. It's one of my favorite shrubs. I think it's one of the nicest fall coloring shrubs on the market. There's a really nice one called Blue Shadow. There's one called Legend of the Small. Lot of really great options there. They're only going to get 2 to 4 feet tall in our area. They have white bottle brush flowers and pink and orangey fall color. I love Sweet Spire. That's a small shrub, also known as Itea. Holds up pretty well to our winter here. Has great fall color, lots of oranges and reds. It also has a little white bottle brush flower in the late spring, early summer. Only gets between 2 and 3 feet tall. Pretty nice little shrub. Other shrubs that are going to work well. Most of the aronias or chokeberries are going to give you great fall color. Also in the shrub line, you could get away with some of the newer sterile barberries will have very nice fall color, so those would be a good option. If we get into perennials, there's more than a handful of options. Some of the Amsonia plants have really nice fall color. I like those. They're going to give you blue flowers in the late spring, early summer, and then really nice sort of copper and bronze colors in the fall. I like Roseanne Cranesbill will continue to bloom all the way until typically a hard frost. Pardon me, so that's a great one for late summer and fall color. Any of the asters, from New England aster to the woods asters to big leafed asters, those are all going to give you late color and are going to hold up really, really well. Other fall coloring plants, the Geum tend to hold up pretty nicely into the fall and have some nice fall color. Some of the ornamental grasses shouldn't be overlooked for their fall interest. The blue stem grasses, specifically little blue stem like Carousel and Twilight Zone and Standing Ovation, those are wonderful plants for nice fall color. Prairie Dropseed is a great fall coloring plant. Of course, if you're just adding some, if you don't mind doing some annuals, celosia, mums, ornamental peppers, a lot of those are going to add some nice fall interest as well. Black-eyed Susans and Echinacea, things like that are going to give you some nice fall color as well. So those are just a handful of my favorite options for some of that late color. I have 2 questions left and then we'll wrap things up. Second to last, we've got a large ornamental grass plant of some kind. It's big and has been doing great for the last few years. This year, though, it's green around the edge, but is basically hollow in the middle. What could be going on? This is actually a very common problem. It is something that I get asked quite frequently. It's one of the reasons that I thought I would add it to this list and address it. So a lot of times what I see is the grass is growing really well along the perimeter of the plant, but the center is kind of dead and hollow. What happens is after a while, as the grass plant gets wider and wider and wider, the root mass gets so dense in the middle and the grass itself gets so dense that water and nutrients and oxygen have a hard time getting down into the root system in that area. And so you get what I call the donut effect, which is, grass blades around the perimeter, nothing in the middle. So you have a handful of options, but the easiest option is to dig the plant out completely, carve the center mass out, and then take a chunk or 2 of the perimeter, kind of mash those together and replant those back in the center of that hole. You can take other pieces from the perimeter and plant those somewhere else. We call this division. It's something that you can do to many perennials, not all, but many perennials. Grasses for sure, hostas for sure, sedum, irises, a lot of those kind of things need or love to be divided when they are getting too large. So This happens to many perennials. If you're starting to see that sort of donut effect, don't be afraid to dig that plant up, cut it into pieces, and divide it. In the case of the grass, you're going to remove that center dead section. In the case of like a really large hosta, you could just cut that up into quarters, put 1/4 back in, take 3/4 and put those somewhere else in the yard, give them to a friend or give them away, something like that. So as far as timing goes, grasses I like to do when they're entering a period of active growth. So I normally will do those first thing in the spring when they're just starting to wake up. So if it's an earlier grass like feather reed grass or one of those, I'm probably doing that in April. If it's something like a miscanthus grass or blue stem or some of those, I'm probably going to do that a little bit later on in the springtime. So might be end of April or even into middle of May time frame for those, but just depends upon the plant. So you may want to, if you've got something specific, you know, look it up to see what the best time of year to divide sedum or the best time of year to divide monarda, you know, things like that. And I'm sure you can find that information out there. Okay, last question. It seems like almost every year my maple tree gets little black and red bumps on the leaves. It's like the tree has measles or something. I've sprayed it with various products and nothing seems to help. This is most likely, quite confident here, a problem called maple bladder gall. So maple bladder gall is actually caused by a little mite, a almost microscopic insect that overwinters on the bark of the tree. And when the buds are first opening up in the very early springtime, the mites wake up, they will walk up the tree, go to a bud, and they will basically lay eggs. It's kind of, they almost sort of sting the leaf and deposit eggs in there. The leaf's reaction, the leaf tissue's reaction to that, the presence of that insect, is to form that little bump, which typically starts off red and then eventually turns black, and that little mite will emerge out of the leaf, so it sort of uses the leaf as a bit of an incubator. The mite will come back out, and then it'll go back down to the bark where it will overwinter until next year. They are basically harmless to the tree. They really don't cause any damage to the plant at all. They can be a little bit unsightly, but there's really nothing that you need to do about it. And as this viewer wrote, they have tried various products. Now, I will say timing is everything. There is about a 24 to 48 hour window where chemical sprays might be effective. So 365 days a year, 1 or 2 days of the year might be effective. So this is not something that I would recommend spraying for. Most likely you're not going to hit the timing right anyway, and the insect is so small, and if the weather conditions aren't absolutely perfect for it, your spray is going to be absolutely worthless. So don't waste your time or money, and certainly don't waste the chemical. If you've watched any of my videos before, you know that I am not a proponent of the quote-unquote if it flies it dies method of spraying, or just the I want to spray everything in my yard to prevent all insect damage. My goal is to, if there is a problem that needs specific attention, let's address that specifically. Let's make sure we time it right so that we're effective, and let's make sure that we're not harming other species that might be beneficial to us or to the environment and be also on that plant. So I like to be real cautious, and I like to use chemicals very, very sparingly, if at all. So I'm a proponent of planting things that don't require a lot of spraying, and I'm also a proponent of letting insects munch on plants. There are a lot of insects that will feed on plants that do very little or no damage to a plant, and they're just there feeding, so we just kind of let them do their thing. And you know, it might be a caterpillar that is going to turn into a beautiful butterfly. It may be the larva of an insect that the birds are going to eat. So there's a lot of benefit to having the insects in our environment. So kind of let them go unless they're really causing major damage to whatever plant you might have in your yard. So yeah, that's my list of questions. I love answering questions like this. I love to have the opportunity to address your concerns. It's really why I do these programs. I do it to try to educate, to help. There's a lot of really bad information out there on the internet, on TikTok and Facebook and YouTube and every other social media outlet. There's just a lot of bad information out there. So just try to combat that with hopefully some good information, and try to put it in a in an easy to digest format, so to speak. So I hope that these things are helpful to you. I hope that you get are able to pick up something from them, and more than anything, I hope that you get a chance to get outside this weekend. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being with me.